My company offers 7-day work weeks, no paid time off, no benefits, and $18 per hour. Which one of you losers needs a job? Yes, Big Ambitions is that game where you build your huge business empire while stepping over your morale, employees, and poor and small businesses, only to become the biggest fish in the pond. In this video, I will climb from extreme poverty to conquering New York, selling rotten burgers from China. And at some point, my ambitions grew so big that the game was not able to handle them anymore, rendering my save literally unplayable. To make everything spicier, I started a custom game with $0 on my balance, turning my playthrough into absolute torture. And as you probably could have guessed, with $0 in New York, you are getting only anti-human infrastructure and maybe beaten over the head with batons by the police. After I created a character and picked up appropriate for a person of my means outfit, the game was started. By choosing custom game mode, I completely skipped all tutorials, so I needed to come up with ideas how to become rich myself. I played this game a little bit 2 years ago, and I remember that I could work as a cashier in a store. After a short walk, I stumbled upon a supermarket where for $25 per hour I could sell myself into slavery of customer service. Well, that work doesn't require any actions from me except just generally wasting a lot of time watching a timer. Gladly I could skip time. After a hard work shift, I was tired and hungry, but at least I had $160 in my pockets. That was my first money, so I decided to treat myself and buy a burger. This cafe seems to be a busy place. No wonder its market valuation is almost $3 million. Every competitor's business in this game is simulated. Every New York street was covered with all types of shops, restaurants, nightclubs, gyms, or even law firms.
Wait, isn't that a copyright infringement of some kind? I bet that guy can sue you.
Aimlessly walking down the street, I discovered that being homeless negatively impacts my mental health. Gladly, I remembered what some guru once said.
If you're homeless, just buy a house.
Yeah, right. Why didn't I think of that myself? But it turned out that a lot of houses had a daily rent higher than what I was making at the store, and those which I could afford still needed thousands of dollars as a deposit. Being desperate because of my poverty, I came back to this shop to work another shift. Unfortunately, my shift for today was already over and I couldn't start a new one, so I had no other choice than to think of something else. Looking at the map, I discovered that there were some delivery driver vacancies all over the city, so I caught a taxi and went to the closest one. Near IKEA, there was a van and I started a shift by clicking on it. Well, this work was at least something. To deliver the goods, I not only needed to go to a specific location, but also to take the right thing from the trunk and give it to the homeowner. When I delivered everything and returned the van, I was paid $300 with the deduction of repair fees because of... Anyway, that was a lot more than I got paid at the supermarket, so I decided to rest on a bench a little and do more. And then I got a message. It was already 8 AM and I should have been working at the cash register instead of resting. The manager was not happy about me being missing. Adrenaline kicked in. I knew I should act fast. So I deleted the chat history with the manager and pretended that I never worked at that store. So I ate some French fries and went to do more deliveries. After concluding one shift, I was starting another one at the closest van, and because there was a lot of vans nearby, I was never really out of work. Don't get me wrong, this was not a money printing machine. It felt really slow and grindy. That's how, by hopping vans, I managed to scratch up enough to rent myself the cheapest apartment in New York. I went to it and my $1,000 was now gone. Only then I did discover that my new apartment was completely empty. But at least I'm not homeless now. Success! But it was clear now that to live a good life in Big Ambitions, I needed to actually play the game as it was intended and not as Euro Truck Simulator. So I needed to scratch up some money for my first business. And to do that, I came back to the grind. Half an hour later, I remembered that in this game I could take a bank loan to start a business. So I went to a bank. Apparently they knew I was broke and stupid, so they agreed to give me only $2,000. I, being stupid, decided to not take it since it was too small, not realizing that this was the best option I would get in the near future, because the near future would be very idiotic. I really shouldn't have skipped the tutorial. You see, I thought the bank looked at how much money I had on my balance when giving me a loan, but the bank instead was looking at how much money I made per day. And somehow this game doesn't count delivery as a proper income. So even though I was making money, for the bank I looked like someone who pays $35 on rent and doesn't make any money at all. So yeah, I wasn't the most trustworthy client. But my stupidity doesn't end here, no, it's only the beginning. So, after a lot of work, I finally scratched up enough to open my first ever business. But what business I should open? I thought I was smart and decided to research the market first. I found out that in Garment District there were a lot of businesses, but there was only one bookstore. In theory, it meant that I'd have less competition, thus more money. In practice though, I grinded $5,000, found the cheapest location, rented it, and I was finally ready to start playing this game properly, but... Had what? So yeah, I thought that apparently I just can't read, thus can't have a bookstore. Sounds right. So, what would be a solution? Correct! I need to go to business school. I declined the rent of the building to get my deposit back, and while cursing the game for making me go to school, just went there out of despair. If you weren't born yesterday, you probably know what every business school looked like. Gurus with questionable pasts, flexing their rented Lamborghinis and offering you overpriced crap that is 100% going to change your life overnight. This one was no exception. Not only were the prices absolutely demonic for me, they also required me to complete all courses in a very specific order. So to study headquarters, I needed to learn market demands. And to learn market demands, I needed to learn basic HR first. Well, I thought, if the game says so, I would do it even though it would literally take all my money. Studying is the same as working as a cashier, just skip time and that's it. So after a bit of skipping, headquarters was studied. Like every other business school, this one I entered with $5,000 and left with $300. So to finally open my bookstore, I need to work as a delivery driver just a little bit more. So I was driving all over New York, delivering boxes and eating cheap fast food. A few very boring hours later, when I scratched up a little fortune to open a store, I decided to finally calculate what I need to sell the books and where I could get these books in the first place. From 2 years ago, I roughly remembered that I could buy every commodity to sell in a wholesale store. I went there and after a few minutes, I realized that books were not sold here. I finally decided to refer to the in-game wiki, which is very good actually, only to be absolutely stunned by what I would see there. Bluestone Imports. Wait, what the hell? Yes, I now realize how stupid I was. 2 years ago, I dropped the game very early, but I remembered that some businesses needed commodities delivered overseas. To deliver a commodity from overseas to my store, I need to rent an office, hire a purchasing agent, sign a contract with an importer, rent a warehouse, buy a delivery truck, hire a driver, hire a logistics specialist, and only then will my books go to my store, and I cannot do it all by myself. I now realize that the game put this school roadblock not to make my life miserable, but to protect me from actions that I could not yet afford. Hell, the course I needed wasn't called something like learn how to read to open a bookstore. No, it was called headquarters, literally yelling at me that I would need to set up a headquarters to run this type of business. Just don't skip the tutorial as I did, guys. Suffering for your amusement is my job, but you do not deserve it. What you deserve is a subscription to my YouTube channel. It's free and I really need to reach 10,000 subscribers before the new year, so please subscribe and leave a like. It also meant that if I had opened a simple store back then without going to school, right now I probably wouldn't need to drive a truck to make a living. After taking this low blow from life, I finally decided to make something simple, a fast food restaurant. Before starting, I verified that I could buy everything I needed in a wholesale store, and gladly it was all there. But a fast food restaurant is not a store. I assumed that burgers need to be cooked on a stove, I guess? And before that, should they be stored properly in a freezer? The wiki came in clutch again and told me that to sell a burger, I would need to have an industrial grill, which is sold in an appliance store. I quickly went there and discovered that I could actually afford a grill. But it would be quite a restaurant if I had only one grill sitting on the floor, right? I also remembered that to sell something, I'd need a cash register, at least 2 tables to put my appliances on, and at least 1 storage shelf. It turned out that I wouldn't need any freezers to store my burgers. They would be just fine on the shelf. The price of all this wasn't very promising, to be honest, and here is the total price, but with the product and rent deposit. So yeah, I went grinding again. Honestly, this was painful. When I scraped up a little more, I decided to cancel the rent of my apartment to get the deposit back since I wasn't using it anyway, and $1,000 would help me a lot. I thought it was time to finally begin preparations to open my little place. I found a quite nice location in an industrial city. It was cheap and had a very nice foot traffic index, which meant that I wouldn't need to spend on marketing to have my first customers. The issue with industrial city is that it's placed on the other side of the East River, and to get there I'd need to travel on the bridge, which is as long as the whole map of the game, twice. Also, if I'd need to see something on the map, I'd need to scroll the map for a couple of hours to finally get to the other side, which is extremely annoying, to say the least. The first time I traveled there on the subway because it was very cheap. On arrival, I decided to scout the competition and went to a nightclub, purely out of professional interest, yes. Then I went to an industrial city wholesale store, where I found out that chicken kebab cost almost half as much to buy while being roughly the same price as the burger to sell. So I decided that my first burger store would be actually a kebab store. Then I made a couple of deliveries and went to the local hardware store. It appeared to be a factory store where I could buy everything to build myself a factory to make my own products. Although becoming an industrial magnate was out of my league because the price of a single conveyor belt was twice my money, and the price of some machines was as high as the money my whole family ever saw, times 10. Of course, later in this video I will become an industrial magnate and it will even break the game completely, but for now I was focused on my first ever business. I rented a building, chose that it would be a fast food restaurant and named it Star Food. There is no meaning in that name, don't bother. But now I needed to buy all the appliances. Since it was too expensive to pay for the delivery and I didn't have my own car, I decided to take a delivery driver job and use the van for myself. Although I was stupid and declined the job mid-route, so my van disappeared into thin air. It wouldn't have worked anyway because the developers apparently prevented that. So I had to pay for a delivery. Yes, I ordered everything I thought I needed, and when it finally came to my place, well, it turned out that I forgot half of things, and I'll have to pay for a delivery again when I'll have some money, because I was already down to 1,000 again. So again, an hour of working as a delivery guy, another order from an appliance store, and I finally was ready to make last preparations. I went to a wholesale store and bought a box full of kebabs for $600. I had only $300 left. I needed to finally start making some money. I set up a grill on a desk, filled it with kebabs from a box, and I was finally ready to start making millions. But to sell something, I needed to have a paper bags at the cash register, and I completely forgot to buy them. Thankfully, they weren't very expensive. So after another trip, I was finally ready. I opened my store and stood behind the cash register to serve my first customers. And there were some customers. My customers weren't really satisfied with the interior, the lack of a bathroom, the absence of music or even a cashier uniform. But it didn't matter. They were buying my crappy kebabs in a restaurant without even a chair to sit on. I worked till the sunset when my energy went to zero and I was very close to death. I ate my own kebab and went to a bench outside to rest after a hard shift. After midnight, I finally got the news on how much money I made. Almost $600. Wasn't very much, but it was very effective since I didn't need to drive around and could just skip time while working. And I still had a lot of kebabs left in my store, so I could just sell them for a few more days and make a lot of money. And boy, I did. The second day, the word about my beautiful place without tables spread, and I sold $900 worth of kebabs. The third day, I sold another $600. The business was booming. Yeah, the total amount of my money still wasn't very impressive for a regular viewer, but I remembered who might actually be impressed by my successes. The bank. I went to a bank and out of pure interest just asked for a 30 grand loan. And somehow they right away handed me the money. They indeed looked at how much money I make per day when given a loan, and now when I finally have a proper income, they just gave me everything I needed. Of course, I could spend money as I want, and this game allows me to buy a lot of useless stuff, but I think I need to spend my money to achieve 3 things with my cafe. First, make it run automatically without my presence, so I could be doing something else while making money passively. Second, increase the number of items to sell, so customers would be able to spend more money in my store, increasing the average payment. And third, to make my place look nice and satisfy every customer's needs. That way, there will be more customers and they will likely buy more than 1 or 2 items, making me more money. First of all, I decided to order more appliances. I bought 1 more grill, a salad bar and a fridge for soda. At IKEA, I ordered some tables, chairs and loudspeakers to play some chill music. Then I needed to hire a worker for cleaning and customer service. After a little bit of investigating how to do so, I stumbled upon a recruitment agency where I paid them a little to find some poor souls who would enslave themselves for the sake of my profits. Then it was time to handle automatic logistics. For an additional $400, the wholesaler could deliver all products to my store each Monday. I placed an order for a ridiculously low amount of everything and went to decorate my store. It was not a lot of space to have something great, but I used it effectively. Not bad for me. Researching the market, I increased my prices a little, making them lowest in the neighborhood to lure more customers. Also, I found out that in an industrial city nobody was selling hot dogs while people really wanted them, so I ordered a hot dog grill as well. To grand reopen my upgraded restaurant, I needed to wait until the wholesale store delivered everything on Monday, and the recruitment agency found some workers for me. So I needed to skip the time effectively, and the most effective way to do it was to sleep on the bed. I rented a little house for myself close to my store and furnished it a little bit. I bought a bed, a toilet, and the thing no man could live without: a car. Wait, no, I bought a car as well, but what a man could not live without was a huge RTX 5019 gaming PC with a 4K monitor. Ah, yes, that's what I love. At least in this virtual world, I could be happy. With my own house, I could sleep all day and play video games on PC, which was skipping time very effectively while keeping my happiness level high. I didn't know yet why I needed a happiness level, but I still needed to skip some time till Monday. On Sunday night, I reviewed all job applications the HR agency could find and hired most of the applicants. The difficult thing was making a schedule, because all workers have their demands on when they want or don't want to work and what they want and what they don't want to do. Such peasants, how dare they? I need to run my business 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because while yes, there are significantly fewer customers at night, there are customers at night. So if I don't serve them, I'll lose money. Also, a lot of business owners don't run their businesses at night, so if you want a burger at 4 AM, there is no option other than to go to my place. Finally, when everything was ready, a wholesaler delivered goods to my storage. I parked my car illegally outside of my store and made a grand reopening. And it was a success. Customers were almost happy. Almost, because they still wanted a bathroom and my employees didn't have any uniforms. I ordered a toilet and a sink, but how to make uniforms would be a mystery for me for a little bit longer. Also, to make my business more attractive, I found a marketing agency on the map and ordered a little bit of ads for my store. And it was a success. On the first day, my store made $4,000. The next day, $6,000. That was incredible. But my customers still were not satisfied with my bathroom. They had been asking for some privacy. What's wrong with just a toilet that you can see from the entrance without any doors to close? I don't get it. See, my employee is fine with that. Why are you, dear customers, not? But despite minor setbacks, the business was running successfully. With my first money, I even did some renovations and painted my walls with more pleasant colors. Then I discovered that I had ordered too little from the wholesaler. In just 2 days, I sold everything and it was only Wednesday. So I bought a lot more and delivered it using my new car. At the end of the week, my store made me $42,000. And yet it was only the humble beginning of my business journey, because in just a few days I would be running a whole empire of different chain stores, making 10 times more than that each day. But let me tell you how I got there, because it was not without a trouble. While I was delivering goods, I heard an advertisement on the radio about another bank in the city, and that's right, there were indeed a second bank. This bank could give huge loans, and after running my shiny store for about a week, I called them on the phone. Surely they wouldn't give me a big alright, I wasn't prepared for that. But don't worry, having 800,000 is not much in this game, because in just a couple of hours, almost all of that was already spent. Spent on creating a business empire with questionable ethics. My second business should be a supermarket, I assumed. Something that would put under the belt both Walmart and Auchan. I found a huge building on a very wide avenue and rented it. But a Walmart competitor could not just resell something from a wholesale store. No, it wouldn't be cost effective. We would need a reliable partner. China! But Comrade San Huiwin won't work with a loser like me. They're looking for a respectable partners, and my character in fake Adidas rags isn't exactly looking like one. That's what I would be working on. First I went to a clothing shop to buy myself a nice suit. Only when I came back home did I realize that I didn't need to buy anything to change clothes if I have a wardrobe. What else does a respectable businessman need? Of course, a proper car. I could of course buy luxury variants, but they all were very expensive, so I bought the Ford Raptor, since it was very fast and had a very spacious trunk. And let's put it that way, the car was a monster. After driving a delivery van or this crap, the Ford was supersonically fast. Then, to work with Eastern partners, I needed to rent an office for my headquarters. Since I had a lot of money, I decided to rent the biggest and the most expensive one, which would have its benefits later. I rented one right on Columbus Circle in the building that appears to be a Trump Tower in real life. Because I had money, I went to an interior design agency to maybe save some time on decorating the office. But it appeared that saving time on interior decoration would make me very poor, so I decided to decorate office myself. I ordered a lot of stuff from IKEA and the office supply store, and when it all was delivered, I set up my first layout. It wasn't very huge or effective, it was just fine for a small company like mine. Now I needed to make some contacts. In my respectable suit and in my respectable car, I went to all importers in New York. When I just sit at their reception for a second, they will be added to my phone book, so when I need them later, I can just easily call. Very close to my office was the office of the HR agency. I needed to use their services one last time because I was planning to hire my own recruiters who would be way more effective and cheaper. And while they were looking for my new employees, I've been setting up a warehouse since China can't deliver goods straight to the stores. So I rented one empty warehouse, ordered a lot of storage shelves, and bought a delivery van, which is very slow, and I was supposed to drive it myself from the dealership in Industrial City to the warehouse on the other side of that bridge. It's so painful. Devs, please cut off half or more of that bridge length. It's so annoying. When all the infrastructure was ready, it was time to finally set up the supermarket itself. I bought a lot of things myself, ordered a lot of other things via delivery, and all that cost me more than 100 grand. This supermarket will be indeed very profitable, I thought. With the help of my headhunters, I hired a lot of customer service and cleaning employees, made a 24/7 schedule, and was finally ready to receive a delivery from China on Monday. Unfortunately, it turned out that delivery from China couldn't put my things on the storage shelves I bought or straight up dump everything on the floor. They can use only pallet shelves, which I didn't buy. So the grand opening of my supermarket was postponed till the next Monday because apparently all fresh and frozen food was brought back to China. But my issues didn't end there. To deliver goods from warehouse to store, I needed to set up a delivery chain. With wholesale, it was very simple. I could just open the deliveries tab on the business menu and it was all there. But with the warehouse, I needed to create a delivery plan in which I should select one or multiple delivery paths, which I did, but it took me about an hour to set up the amount of goods that should be delivered to the store. I went to the business menu, but it wasn't there. In the delivery menu, can't see it here. I even tried to talk to my logistics manager directly in the office and watched some guides on YouTube. None of it worked. And only after roughly an hour of trying to understand how to do it, I found this little arrow which expands the delivery destination menu, allowing me to set up the amount of goods to be delivered. Alright, everything was ready to open my supermarket. People were happy shopping at my new business, and I was happy seeing my new balance grow. Only some of my workers were not happy about their jobs. They were demanding healthcare benefits, so I went to the hospital and bought them, since they weren't very expensive. But other workers were demanding something that I could not provide: a peaceful work environment, which in language of this game meant always having more than 50% happiness for your character. Apparently, if my character is not happy enough, he starts calling all the cashiers and makes them listen to him explaining Warhammer 40,000 lore, I don't know. To increase happiness, I could go to nightclubs, play computer games, poop in a toilet, or work out in a gym. There is only one problem with all that. All these bonuses are very short and temporary, so if I want to maintain that level, I need to constantly do at least some of these activities, which is very annoying. It was just much easier to set up an HR and headhunter pair, which would be replacing all unhappy employees automatically. Although I was making more than 10 grand per day, it was still very little. In fact, my huge supermarket was making almost as much as my tiny little eatery back in the industrial city. Since I was role-playing as an evil businessman, I decided to make the office as inhumane as possible. Meet the open space panopticon office design, where low-ranking peasants would be sitting on cheap desks in a circle, while inside the circle would be sitting the middle manager, looking at their screens behind their backs. 100% efficiency, 100% evil, 0% humanity and privacy, but who cares about these things nowadays? Don't like something? We don't care, since if you decide to leave, my headhunter will find a replacement. And if the headhunter decides to leave, another 3 will find a replacement for him. But my employees never really complained about these conditions. Apparently, the job was just mysterious and important. Now, when my corporation was very stable and pretty much automated, it was time to build an empire. Since my first Star Food restaurant was looking very good, it was a no-brainer to build more Star Food restaurants to create a chain. Unfortunately, in this game there is no chain mechanic, but let's imagine building a chain is cool, alright? The second Star Food place would be in Murray Hill. There I managed to rent a little bigger place than the first restaurant had. While making renovations for this store, I found out why clients were complaining about the lack of privacy in the first store. It appears that I could buy a toilet booth with a door. Order from China, logistics set up, employers hired, week scheduled, marketing ordered. Time to open my second point. Boom! Queues of customers, $20,000 per day, and some very unhappy competitors.
We at TLM Enterprise always welcome new businesses. Just remember, don't get too ambitious.
Don't worry, I'll dance on your grave. These are so-called rivals. The only thing I know about them is that I have a menu where I can see that I am literally the worst businessman in all of New York right now. Also, when starting a game, I had an option to increase the amount of their attacks on me. How these attacks would look? Would they use fair competitive tactics? Or instead, straight up try to put me 6 feet under? I didn't know yet. I just knew that in this game there is a properly functioning hospital, so you got the point. I was though a little slow on the uptake, so I decided to open another Star Food, now in Hell's Kitchen. While I've been setting everything up, I've been wondering why someone decided to call their district a freaking Hell's Kitchen. I even googled that, and it appears that a long time ago this place was very high on crime, so one cop said,
"This place is hell itself."
And his partner argued, "Hell's a mild climate. This is Hell's Kitchen." Doesn't explain anything, doesn't affect the story of this video, just a fun fact that now you have to live with. Star Food in Hell was open now. So was the Star Food in Garment District. Each of these had their own major rivals, so all of them were calling me to whine about how much they don't like fair competition. With all these new businesses, I was now making 50 grand per day. It now became very difficult to order the right amount of burgers from China, since it was a very painful thing to calculate for different businesses with a lot of different positions. So the supply shortages and broken ice cream machine became very common in my whole Star Food chain. My next big idea was to open a bookstore again, since I wanted to do so from the beginning. Now when I had a lot of employees working from my headquarters, I could easily order a lot of books from China to sell them here at the markup. Since my first warehouse had only one truck slot, it was limited to 6 deliveries per day, so for a completely new chain I needed to rent and set up another warehouse. But because I already had money and a lot of free office space for new managers, it was very easy. Contracts signed, buildings rented, employees hired, boom! My first bookstore from the Raider chain was here. I also rented another apartment because my first one was in industrial city and traveling there was very inconvenient. Unfortunately, the Nvidia app decided to not record how I built it. Nvidia, fix your freaking app already, it's been acting weird all year. Another Raider store was very soon opened in Hell's Kitchen. The money was really flowing when I discovered a very intriguing mechanic, a buyout of competitors' businesses. I've been monitoring this Kaboob's Kebab in Lower Manhattan for a long time, since I wanted to have a Star Food in this district as well. Its market valuation was just $130,000, but they seem to be struggling since when I sent an offer of $100,000, they agreed and now this struggling business was in my hands. I immediately fired all their low-skilled employees and rebuilt the place almost from scratch. Very soon, it became a very profitable store. I made back what I paid in less than a week. But the biggest lesson I learned was that buying out businesses could be actually useful in the future. And very soon, we will be crushing competition with that knowledge. Very soon, I had 5 Raider locations all over New York, and alongside Star Food, it was making me more than $100,000 per day. Here, I decided to open another chain, liquor stores. I repeated the process of setting up logistics and stores once again, only now I made it even faster. I discovered that I could save the building blueprint and then go to an interior installation firm to set up a store in just a couple of clicks. Yes, it was way more expensive, but this was a time when my time became more expensive than money. I messed up the storage shelves and pallet shelves again in my new liquor warehouse, but no matter what, everything was ready. In just 1 week, I opened 3 liquor stores. All of so-called rivals completely freaked out at my awesomeness and activated. Rivals activate when I have 3 or more stores in their specific district. That's why they didn't activate earlier. All my stores were evenly split among all districts. Now, however, when I opened more stores, they all activated simultaneously. While activated, a rival can make active and passive attacks. Active attacks I am yet to witness, but passive attacks struck me immediately. Now I could not rent anything from buildings these rivals own, and they, unfortunately, own like almost the whole of New York. Gladly, they cannot evict me from rented property, but they also wouldn't let me rent anything new. At this point, I was already in 5th place on the Rivals leaderboard, making almost 600,000 per week. It was still not enough to beat the major rivals, but I had a plan for how exactly I would beat all of them at once. For that, I'd need to build a factory. And you would see very soon how much of a pain building factories is. But how could the factory help me? Well, the obvious thing is that mass producing myself is much cheaper in the long term. See the numbers yourself. I could buy cheap classic clothing from China for roughly $11 each. But if I want to craft it, I'd need to buy only cheap fabric for $3. So apparently it's almost 4 times cheaper. But the most important thing is that I could produce something that could be not bought from China, like expensive clothing or smartphones. While in creation expensive clothing would cost me only $6 for an expensive fabric, I could sell it for as much as $200 each. But do you remember how much factory appliances were worth? Well, I forgot a little. That's why when I bought my first machine and started experimenting, I quickly realized that I'd need a lot more money than I had at the time. I also realized that factory building would be probably a little bit rough and unusual, but I didn't yet know how painful it would be to actually create a proper factory. But for now, I needed to increase my income, so I'd have money to create a proper factory. And to do it, I decided to refine some businesses I already had. Remember my second business, a huge supermarket. What if I told you that a micro fast food restaurant in 75 square meters was making more than a huge 1,000 square meters supermarket? It meant that I needed to build something new inside of this building, and that was another fast food location. First I went to the interior installation firm, but I didn't really like all the options. So I decided to create everything from scratch myself. I won't show you the whole process because I spent an absolutely unreasonable amount of time there. I just wanted to make this restaurant the pinnacle of the whole fast food business in New York. After 2 hours of work, my design was finished. 4 cash registers and 4 duplicates of every kitchen machine were cleverly placed in a dangerously tight manner to ensure that the cashier's path to all appliances would be as short as possible, enabling him to serve each customer faster. And that indeed worked. Just look at all these queues. Wow, this is really impressive. This fast food restaurant alone doubled my income, serving more than 800 visitors per day. After that, I also opened a medium-sized bookstore, but it was just kind of okay. And the liquor stores, though, were a complete disaster. Very small income, even worse than the supermarket, so don't bother with them if you are gonna play this game. China was completely overwhelmed by the amount of food that Americans can consume, so my huge restaurant was struggling with massive shortages at the end of every week. The burgers were especially in demand, so all of them would be eaten faster than they could possibly rot on the shelf without refrigeration. Now that I had effectively doubled my income, I wanted to finally start making my own factories. And it was a painful thing to do. This game might be actually the worst factory builder ever made. I'll show you why. So, like in every factory game, here we have a conveyor belt. We put a raw material on the conveyor belt via input station, and we want this raw material to go through all the machines on the production line to become a finished product. Finished products go to shelves via output station. Looks familiar? Good, because here is where this game for some reason decided to be unlike the others and make itself painful. Conveyor belts can only be 1 tile long. We cannot extend them. Almost all the machines in this game have different widths, and it differs not by a tile, but by a half a tile. And remember, conveyor belts can't be half a tile, only 1 whole tile. Remember conveyor splitters? They are usually boxes with 1 input and 3 outputs. In this game, splitters split conveyors not into 3 but into 2, making the whole line shift by half a tile. So there are a lot of situations where after building a good production line for a 15 minutes, you see this misalignment, making it impossible to merge this conveyor with that conveyor. Because remember, there are no half conveyors in this game. And to solve this, you have to split the misaligned line with another splitter, then immediately merge everything back, which will shift the line back to normal. How is this a good game design, developers? Please explain to me. That is outrageous. Why won't you just make conventional 1-tile splitters that would split everything into 3 directions and would not shift the conveyor line? Also, you should know that at least when I was filming it, it was not possible to select and move multiple objects. Every single object must be moved 1 by 1 by hand. Imagine my face when I spent about 30 minutes constructing this production line and then realized that I needed another one like it. But to make room for it in this huge warehouse, I'd need to move this one one to the railing over there. And of course, when moving it manually, I messed everything up. But that is not even all the sins of this game factories. The most idiotic thing I will show you a little bit later. The cloth factory is actually very easy to build, so apart from my beef with the splitters, I had no other issues. But gladly, my pain was not in vain. Very soon, I designed my first clothing store. Interior design in this game is actually very well done, and I love doing it. But what I love even more in this game is choking the competition. I opened this store in Industrial City, and the big win was that there were no other stores that sold expensive clothing. Every store in the neighborhood was selling only cheap clothing imported from China, while I was selling both cheap and expensive, making my store very profitable. After opening another 3 clothing stores all over the city, I wanted to use my position as a manufacturer to destroy all other clothing stores. Why would I do that? Well, right now, if I put a price on my things that is way higher than the competition's price, customers would not buy it, since why pay more if they could pay less? But if there is no competition, I could crank up the price to the sky, making my profits unreasonably high, because my customers would be left without any choice at all. That's basic economics, nothing new. Because I was producing expensive clothes in Industrial City, I was selling them very well, while my cheap clothes imported from China were not selling that well because a lot of competitors in the district. So I decided to go on a war against my competition. I started selling cheap clothes for a wholesale price. This put my competitors in a really struggling position. They were forced to lower their prices to mine so they would be able to sell at least something. But because they weren't selling any expensive clothing, their business model just cracked, making them absolutely unprofitable. And the end came when China increased its prices on cheap clothes because of some kind of shortage. It made my lovely competition lose $15 per sale. And while they were struggling, I created production lines for cheap clothing as well. So now, even from selling everything at a wholesale price, I was making profits. For them, it was absolutely over. Very soon, the market valuation of their businesses went very low, so I just bought all the competition in both Lower Manhattan and Industrial City, cranking the prices to the sky and making the unimaginable amount of money. It put me in second place on the rivals list, but I am yet to make my way to the top 1. Unfortunately, for that I would need to deal with factories once again, and it would be way more painful than before. Jewelry is very expensive in this game. While not selling very many, expensive jewelry can cost as much as $2,000 per unit, making it the most profitable commodity to produce. And because I already had experience crushing competition, crushing the jewelry stores would be not that difficult. But creating a production line would be difficult. To create jewelry, I need to combine a polished gem and a metal band in this machine. Metal bands could be just bought from China, while gems need to be cut and polished first. Cutting and polishing isn't difficult, but combining 2 or more things is. Remember that I need an input station to get an item on the conveyor belt and an output station to get it from the conveyor belt to the shelf. Input stations can put only one type of item on the conveyor. The tricky part is that every station needs to be manned by an employee, and because workers can't work more than 50 hours per week, I needed at least 4 workers per station. The worst part is creating a schedule for them. I hate it. It takes so much of my brain power. Fortunately, after playing this game for 30 hours, I discovered that there is a function to fill the schedule automatically. The fun part is that my PC apparently hates making schedules too, because after enabling this function, the game takes literally the whole of my Core i9 for a whole minute to figure out how to do it. Also, more employees means more salaries, more HR, and more medical insurance. So, more employees equals bad, and bad equals a waste of money, and greedy businesses like mine don't quite like it. That's why I've been trying to create a production line where only 2 input stations, one for gems and one for metal bands, would serve 2 product assemblers. And what's the catch, you might ask? Well, the only way to do it would mean that my employee who stands on one of the stations would inevitably be trapped without the ability to get out. And employees need that ability because otherwise they couldn't reach the shelves. So why won't I just put a second input station here and make one conveyor go over the other conveyor to reach the second machine? Oh, well, you see, kid, in this game you cannot make one conveyor go over another one. Is it stupid? Well, to me, it absolutely is. As a man who has finished Satisfactory, I just couldn't believe there was no way. I had banging my head against a brick wall for an hour, trying everything that I could to avoid putting 2 input stations in for 2 assemblers, inevitably realizing that it was logically impossible. Broken in half, I realized that I should not even try anymore. Why bother if I could just put in a lot of employees and input stations. I had all the money in the world anyway. It would literally cost me nothing. With this exact logic, I would very soon completely break the game to an unplayable state, but for now, my jewelry factory was ready to start production. My first and second factories were built as space efficient as possible, enabling me to have absolutely massive production. There was literally no free space left in warehouse. Should I explain once again how I opened the stores? I think not, you already have an idea how it looks. Just believe me, using blueprints and interior installation firms, I opened another 5 stores, now selling all kinds of jewelry. Also at this time, I remember that in this game I could also open office businesses, like web development agencies or law firms. To try it out, I did indeed open a law firm, but it was kind of meh, so I thank God I hadn't done it earlier and moved on. After demolishing the jewelry market as well, I was now making $1 million per day, making me top 1 businessman in the whole of New York. But how I doubled even that and broke the game in the process, I want to tell you real quick. The way to go was a chain of electronics stores. Selling phones and smartwatches is a very profitable business that requires the building of complicated factories. I, however, did not want just some stores. I wanted to be the only one on the market. And at this point, all competitors had their factories too, so I needed to have better factories than they had. That's why I needed not 1, but 2 more factories. I rented 2 big warehouses, one to create a phone factory, the second to create a smartwatch factory. The production of smartwatches is the same as the production of phones, logically. I just needed to switch the side of the components, so I wouldn't need to create 2 layouts. I could create just 1, then save it as a blueprint and make the interior installation firm handle the rest. This time, I didn't even bother to be efficient with employees. I paid them just $18 per hour. Why would I care? Little did I know that I should have cared, because my layout was so inefficient that I had to employ more than 250 workers per factory. That was more employees than all my previous businesses had combined, twice. In my first office, I had no more space for new HR managers, so I rented another office to fit everyone. After half an hour of clicking and waiting for an automatic schedule creation, I started the production. But very soon, I encountered a very interesting thing. While sleeping, I noticed that each hour there were a little freeze of the game. I didn't think it was something important. I was more troubled by another fact. My factories were designed that way. On one side of the building, there were lines to produce components from raw materials. On the other side, there were lines to produce final products from components. And although I had perfectly calculated the number of components produced, it turned out that my incompetent employees weren't splitting them evenly. The 3 assemblies that were closer to component side of the factory were getting all the components, while those farther away were getting almost nothing. I thought that given enough time, the first 3 would fill up very quickly and workers would be delivering to the other 3. And I was kinda right, but it took almost 4 weeks to finally run the factories at full capacity. I opened 5 electronics stores. Electronics were the most profitable commodity in the game, by far. These stores were making me as much money as the whole empire that I had built before. That is how good they were. Unfortunately, what wasn't good was the thin fabric of reality itself. Because I had more than 1,000 employees in total in all my stores and factories. Each new day, the game was lagging more and more. Now, every hour, I experienced a 2 to 5 second freeze. Even when I had Alt-Tab to check the browser, my whole computer was stuttering. Skipping time by sleeping was almost as long as just standing still under normal conditions. The massive scale of my industry had broken the game itself, rendering it absolutely unplayable. It was safe to say that my ambitions were bigger than the game's ability to handle them. And all of that could have been avoided if the devs had just added a conveyor that could go over another conveyor, enabling me to reduce input stations by about 5 times. But despite a really poorly designed factory building experience, this game was an absolute banger in all other things, and I was glad to play it. If you enjoyed watching this, also check out my Mountain Blade Bannerlord video, it's another banger. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. I really want to reach 10,000 by the end of the year. See ya!